Hey everyone. I'm going to give you all a minute to jump in here. First person, there we go. We got a winner here. First person to say something, Paul. Hey, what's up? Got Sarah from Dallas. Hey, where's everybody? Where's everybody coming in from? I'd love to hear where you're at. Let's hear like where everyone's at in the world right now. We got Richmond, Virginia, British Columbia, Canada. Got Ohio, a couple of Ohios, different places. That's cool. You got Tim, England, holding it down. Come on. And Philadelphia. Mike, I didn't think about it. Philadelphia. If I'm not, they are the only undefeated NFL team still, right? This season, I mean. And then Arrow, holding it down. Hong Kong. We are global. 12 hours different. It is 3 a.m. Arrow, thank you for being here. That's amazing. Alicia Jackson, Florida. Come on. I have a feeling we are less than 50 feet apart right now. Dallas, Phoenix, man, all over the place. Los Angeles, there we go. Cool. Hey, I'm excited about this today. Before I was like, we released 2 books, right? We're super excited about this. Claudia, what's up? Germany. All right. Host mastery, guest mastery. I will say this, before I was ever a guest, I was a host. So this is my roots. This is my core. I believe in indie podcasters, and being a guest is great. I love it. I will always do it. But being a host, I think, is a real gift to the world. Who agrees it's a labor of love a little bit? Being a podcast host, even if you've got it monetized or it's building your credibility and stuff, it is a labor of love, right? I mean, when it comes down to it, it's something that we do because we're passionate. Yeah, some people are agreeing with me here. So I'm going to quickly share on that before we get started today. And I am so excited about this book, like thrilled. And I'm going to talk about that a lot. So I'm not going to go on. I'm about to go on a rant here. Before I do that, let me let you all know, I said this in the last meeting. I am 34 years old. I've had coffee 3 times in my life. It's been the last 3 days. Very new to coffee. My wife and I figured out a way to do it really healthy. Let's put it that way. So we're doing coffee in like a really healthy way. And I don't have jitters. Like that was my concern because I don't do a lot of caffeine. Like I don't do energy drinks. Like I've never done anything like that. I will be real. I feel like I can run through a brick wall and not feel it. And thankfully there's not been a crash or anything like that. Because again, we're doing it in a really healthy way. Alicia's like a champion when it comes to anything that's like health related. So figure out how to do it really well. Did anyone see the movie Limitless? I asked this in the last thing. Anyone see Limitless? I can't see if you raise your hand, but put it in the chat. Mario, please don't try. If I do try, I'll make sure to film it because then it's worth it, right? So I'm thinking of an Office quote, by the way. Me and Mario both fans of The Office. I feel like I'm Michael Scott when he's running against like that radar that's checking traffic speed. And he's like 31. You know, like I feel like I could do that. Okay, so everyone's saying yes to the Limitless thing, right? Thanks for getting that, Mario. Appreciate it. And Sarah as well. I feel like that's me right now. Like I took a sip of this coffee and I was like, what have I been missing? And not that I was like tired before, but anyway. Hey, so we just finished up this right beforehand. PodMatch guest mastering. If you're a host and not a guest, I do encourage you to consider being a guest because it's a great way to grow your show. And this book, even if you're not a guest, will give you some insight into what to look for with a guest. So I'm not going to talk about this book at all in here other than this right now. I think it's important, but we just finished that up 30 minutes ago. Fun fact about Alicia and I, we work in the same place. We're also married. We're also business partners. And every day, usually at 1 o'clock, which we just pushed this to 30 minutes ago, I make eggs, toast, avocado, and we drink kombucha with that. So it's like our 30-minute thing, but it's also like our administrative time where we can work together. So like I'm making that because I enjoy doing that for both of us. And then we kind of talk through like questions work-wise for the day. So we just like made that happen the last 30 minutes. I'm here. I'm feeling fresh. I ate. My coffee is not worn off. I only have 1 cup, and that's all it takes apparently. But I am so excited to be here. So before I bring on some of the authors from this book, again, super psyched to talk about this. I want to lay a foundation of why we are here. Starting with why is such an important thing to do. I know Simon Sinek kind of stole those words for a book, right? But that's always been the case since the beginning of time. The purpose behind something, the why behind it, makes the what meaningful. It gives you a direction, right? And I want to talk about that for a moment because this book is great. Being a podcast host is amazing. It grows our influence. It builds our businesses. But at the end of the day, the most important thing we can do is impact one person's life. Just one person's life. And I will repeat this every time I get the opportunity to share and talk because we can't lose that perspective. We can't say, I'm going to change the world with this content. Might be true, but can you change one person's life instead of the world? Because that one person might be who really needs it. And as long as we can keep that perspective that we're here to serve that one person who needs the message we have most, or needs our guest message that we bring on, I believe we're making an impact, making the world a better place. So I'm not here to push faith on anybody, but I happen to be a believer of Jesus, right, from the Bible. And at the very least, even if you don't agree with the Bible or anything like that, we can agree that Jesus was a good guy. He consistently, there were stories of him stepping out of his way to go help one person. And that's been my example, to live a life of service. Seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit, is something that I live by. And I encourage all of you with your podcast, make profit, build your influence, but make sure that you're seeking to be that person of value, to serve the one person who needs the content that you have the most. I believe when you do that, there's really no way to lose in this game. And yes, labor of love, it's a lot of work, but the truth is, if you haven't gotten this email yet that I'm about to describe, when you do, it makes it all worth it. This was years ago when I got into podcasting. This is like an emotional one for me. I got an email from a lady who I didn't know, but she'd been listening to my podcast for a while. And my podcast wasn't about relationships, but this email said, Alex, I wanted to let you know I've been listening to your podcast for, I can't remember exactly how long, but a while, since basically it started. And she's like, and you don't know me, but I want to let you know I've been in a verbally abusive relationship for 7 years. And something that you and your guest shared on a recent episode finally was the thing that made me leave. And this person emailed me months later. So it wasn't like they left that night. It was like months later. And they just talked about the transformation they had seen in their life in that time. I'll tell you what, if I produce episodes every week for the rest of my life, and that's all I ever got to hear, in my mind, it's still worth it, because that did change that was a paradigm shift in that person's life. They went from a direction of probably being belittled, being abused verbally, right, to thriving, finding the life that they deserve to live, right? And like I said, if you haven't gotten that email yet, I believe it's going to come as long as you continuously have that one person in your mind. So anyway, wanted to share that because I think it's so important to lay that why foundation before we start. And I'll do that every time I get the opportunity to talk. So excited to be here with everybody today. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat here. So I'm going to bring some people on stage here. So bear with me for a minute. And I'm actually going to start with, if they're here, let me see. Tanya and Michael, here they are, because they were also in the guest mastery book. They're in this book too, but we couldn't get the tech to work. We're going to try it again here, though. So I'm going to start with the two of you. Can you all hear me? Can't hear you at all. Not at all. So the settings up there, let's see what we can do here. We're going to try this for just a second, everybody. It was the same thing in the last one. I'm not sure why, but this interface doesn't seem to enjoy the two of them for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but we've actually used this before with you guys. I'm not sure what's happening there. And the settings, it all looks right, huh? What a bummer. Hey,
what about that?
Did y'all just plug something in? Because now I hear you.
You hear me fine?
Us?
Now we hear you fine. Yes.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness. Okay. I don't know what's happening.
Okay. Hey, listen, takeaway on your podcast, folks, just keep calm. Just keep rolling. Just keep rowing. That's all I can tell you.
You know, I got to share something along those lines real quick. Somebody recently asked me, they're like, hey, you've done this a lot on both sides of the mic. What makes you nervous? And I was like, the conversation now is so natural. Like, what makes me nervous is this thing, is that thing, is everything in here, because you can wake up and all of it can be like, not today. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I'm glad we're getting to chat, though. Good to see both of you.
Hey, nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah.
Wow.
So these two, man, brand face, everything you all do is incredible. These two are in the PodMatch Elite Mastermind. They are incredible individuals that have taught me so much. If any of you here today like the way I show up online on social media, if you don't, it's not their fault. But if you like it, they get the credit for it. Let's put it that way. They really helped me understand how to minimize the amount of work I was doing with my social presence and maximize the joy that comes from it and the effectiveness of it. Tenfold difference in what I've done working with the two of you. Obviously, I don't want to steal your thunder. Can you all just tell us quickly about yourselves? And then I've got a question for you, and we'll dive into that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we have brand face, as he said, and we focus on exactly what Alex was talking about. It's like the purpose, right? Why are you doing what you're doing, and sharing that story out there so that you can attract the people that you want to serve. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we're podcasters, authors, speakers, personal branders. And my story, I will not go all the way back to my childhood, Alex.
Thank
But
you.
I will say it comes from career pain of having doors slammed in my face and not being listened to, not being taken seriously. And when that happened, I realized that if I wanted people to view me differently, I had to change the way I presented myself. And that's pretty much why Brandface exists.
Yeah, and to add to that, I didn't know Tanya existed. I needed a marketer. I got tricked into working with her. She taught me I didn't need marketing. I needed branding. And from there, the secret to all my success is listening to her.
I love that. And Jason, haha. He loves the beard. Not mine, he says, but yours.
Right. Yeah. The first time I met these two, you guys, I love that you all compliment each other so well. But I saw Michael's hair and I was like, what's a guy got to do to get like, apparently I don't talk to God enough or something. I don't know what happened when I was growing up, but it just never happened. But love it. Really respect both of you.
I'm not the only man that's prayed to hold on to my hair by the time I was 50, but for some reason he listened to me. I don't know. That's one of the things he's like,
I'll send you his prayer.
Sure. He didn't give me looks, but he gave me hair. I said, hey, I'll take it.
That's funny. Alicia always prays for me to keep my hair till I'm 50. So hopefully I'll make it. We'll see. Who knows? 34 and I don't got long left, but I guess I do. So I'm psyched to be doing this book with the two of you. And I mean, you all are in both books. So thank you so much for sharing both sides of the mic and being just, yeah, love it. Here we are. In the last meeting, by the way, Chris Williams held up a Where's Waldo book. And he's like, I'm so excited to be part of this book. I'm going to share it on social media because it made me laugh so hard. But hey, the two of you being in the space that you're in, I want to ask you about, it's an acronym that I've heard you all share, and it's like HEAP. So like, what is the HEAP, if you will, code to find your ideal audience, and why is it important to nail down on your PodMatch profile? I'd love to hear how you all have like really honed in on this and kind of what it means as well, if you don't mind describing.
Okay. I'll start with it. It's an acronym for basically dialing in on your ideal audience. And that's really important because if you don't have an ideal audience, like who are you speaking to, right? It's kind of like doing any marketing or any outreach whatsoever. You first need to know who it is you're talking to, how you're going to serve them, who it is you're trying to attract, right? So we came up with this to kind of simplify and help people figure it out. The H in that acronym stands for help, and it's somebody that you can really genuinely help. Who can you serve and make a difference in their life?
Yep. The E is somebody you enjoy working with, and I'll say that if you've got past experience with this, you just apply it to your past experience. If you're brand new to podcasting, imagine the people that are going to hear your message, right? So the E is people that you enjoy working with, because if you enjoy them, you're going to learn more about them.
The A is for appreciate. So that's people who appreciate the value that you bring to the table. That's a little bit different from enjoy. You can enjoy working with somebody, but if they don't appreciate you, how far are you getting, right? And we all want that. As Michael says, it's what's dancing with ugly personalities. Life's too short to dance with ugly personalities.
Well said.
Yeah. Get around the people you like. It'll energize you. And then the P is profitable. It needs to be somebody that's profitable to you. That's not a bad word, guys. Listen, we have to be profitable in the podcast space so we can do more podcasts. Like it cannot come from, there's no such thing as an endless bucket, and we can't just be pouring our own resources into podcasting. We need to be able to monetize. I know that's a demonized word in the podcast space because it is such a place to use Alex's quote, it's a place of abundance. But there's nothing wrong with being profitable, and being profitable helps you reach more people, helps you spend more money on social media and on your ads campaigns, things that draw more listeners. So
I love that. So I think that's so important. And if you all don't mind, or if somebody's taking notes, drop that in the chat, the HEAP, like somebody drop that in there so we can just like kind of quickly see that. There's gotta be a note taker in here, hopefully.
Yep. Leslie's on. Thank you, Leslie's
on it. Thank you, Leslie.
There we go. Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate you. Why is this important to nail down in a PodMatch profile or anywhere? Like if you're not using PodMatch specifically, like why is this important to have in a way that somebody can see it in your minds? Like does that question make sense? Because I just like to know why you think that matters so much up front.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because now, as podcasters, we realize there are so many guests out there and so many podcasts. So it's easy to mismatch, right? It's easy to get on somebody's podcast where it seems like you might be delivering value, or it seems like your guest might be delivering value, but it's not truly spot on. So if you can nail down who that audience is, you can align their audience with your audience and make a double impact, right? So you want to invite guests on that have something to say to your audience. And the only way you're going to know if your audiences match up is if they really define theirs. So, and yours as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we approach, like we love the PodMatch platform. And when we met Alex, to give you a little backstory, we actually had interns in our office that were doing research and sending out letters and calling people. Can we please get on your show? Will you come on our show? Like, y'all, you have to realize when we started our podcast, I literally was like on the road at the time we would do it. I'd pull over at these convenience stores with good internet or self-service, and I would be in my car and I would have to put up coats to stop the sun. They were horrific. They were terrible, right?
We don't have them out anymore, so don't go looking for them.
We took them all down. We was embarrassed about them, and so we've been along the podcast journey for a while, and we couldn't figure out how can we meet up with people. And then when we met Alex, we're like, "Whoa, this is insane," And then we realized that people showing up in the presence of how they show up on PodMatch and the way they build out their profile is very valuable to connecting to the right people. To have on your show, and vice versa.
Love it. Good stuff. And yeah, thanks for the plug with PodMatch. I'm glad it helped, and I'm glad that you guys have leveled up since the side of the road days. That's good. Good to know. Hey, for sake of time,
only after we met you.
That's good, right? I'm glad we helped each other because you all have helped me a lot.
That's right.
Again, I highly recommend if you're looking to like really figure out your brand, right? Like these two are the people that I go to. So really respect the two of you. Hey, before I let you two go, because we're going to bring on the next person, trying to keep it flowing, I'm trying to learn how to balance all of it. I've never done like an event like this. So trying to figure out how do we keep it on time? I ran 3 minutes over last time. But yes, if anyone, I see Jason has a question. If anyone has any question, please let me know. But right before that, I just want to ask, do you have like a critical strategy you can share with podcast hosts in 30 seconds or less? Like I'm putting you on the spot with that, but something that you're just like, this is something you got to do.
Yeah, I would say show up with intention. Show up as we talked about in the last, event a few minutes ago. Show up knowing exactly what you want to accomplish and how you're going to help people. Keep that audience at the center of what you're doing. It's not your guest, of course, right? But the audience is really the one that you're putting on the show for. And keep that front and center. And don't forget your why at the end of the day, because that's the most important thing that you have.
So good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I think that blends with Jason's question. Let me scroll back up to it right here so I'll make sure I get it right.
I'll throw it up here real quick. Here you go.
You got it. There you go. Okay. As a host, do you need to adapt to your guest or should they adapt to you? We approach our podcast in a way that Leslie does a lot of background work, and we try to connect with people that are valuable to our ideal customer, like to our listeners, right? There's different ways to approach your podcast. You could go for that number one spot, that, top 10 spot, stuff like that. You could grow to it organically. We look for what is super valuable to our listeners. And then when we get our host or our guest on there, we say, hey, how can we help you? So I would say if there was a question to that, we adapt to the guest, but we do a lot of background up front to be sure that the guest is valuable to our listeners. I hope that makes sense and answers your question, Jason. I would say if we had to choose, we adapt to the guest.
I respect that. I love that. That's the way I run things too. So Tanya, Michael, thank you for being in both books again. I really appreciate y'all. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Page 35.
Hey, Beyonce.
Page 35.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, how are you? Do we have sound?
Yes.
It is. It's actually 33 in the latest revision. I don't know what happened. Somebody got cut.
33. We've moved up 2 pages.
We missed them.
That's fantastic.
Thank you, Alex. We can't thank you enough. You're amazing.
Love it.
I'll tell you,
Thanks,
you're
guys.
awesome. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Y'all take care.
Bye.
I just realized. Beyonce, welcome. Hey, how are you?
Welcome. Do we have sound?
No, you're
I'm all
good. Yeah, you're
freaked
good.
out.
It's weird when I was
excellent.
removing them from stage. I've been like, they have the ban button right next to the remove from stage button, which I guess makes sense. But I'm always like, press the right button, not the ban button, right? Like I just want them to hang out with us, not be like, get out of here, you're gone, right?
Okay, that's excellent.
There it is. Come on. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for being part of this. Hey, fun fact. Beate was the first person, and I can't remember what the segment of my podcast was called. I had a second day added to my podcast. I think I called it Success Story segment. And you were the very...
It was like just a very short, quick thing that I recorded by myself.
Exactly.
And
that became like the most popular thing we did, because it was like 3 to 5 minutes of just like, here's how I went from A to B. Not like, here's how I like grew up, and like, it's just a really quick tip, and you're the first person to do it. It got a ton of traction. Thank you for not being scared of that format, because I actually ended up having to cut that format because so few people were willing to do it. They're like, this is the most difficult format I can do. Like, me by myself for 3 minutes and something that's valuable was really tough. But thank you for giving me a chance and being that first person on my show to do that.
It probably was the only time in my entire life I followed someone's instructions. So you better hold on to that.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Good stuff. Can you tell everyone just in a few seconds here a little bit about yourself, what you do with your show and stuff like that? You started off as a guest, right? I'd love to hear that part of it, and then we'll get into a question here.
Yes, I started off as a guest, and my show is called The Business Growth Architect Show. And we are a show that's very specific for strategy, anything around strategy. I am known as the growth architect, and I do work with visionaries and thought leaders that want to scale their authority and want to grow their authority and scale their impact. And what that means is I do all the stuff other people hate: strategies, systems, developing things. We are in the process, actually, as a result of the PodMatch community, to build up a whole program where we help now deliver the workflow of the guesting and the hosting, and then launch that so that all the hosts and guests can actually have that system in place, because I happen to really love that kind of stuff.
One of the few. Most people fall asleep, right?
You know, I don't know what's wrong with them.
That leads me straight into my question here. And if anybody has any questions on this topic, feel free to drop it in the chat. Alicia will flag it. But because this is a topic that people need to listen to, and they know that, so they'll listen to it. But how do you do so in a way that keeps engagement, if that makes sense? Because for most people, it's a chore. We need the systems, we need the processes, we need this, like, we need the strategy, right? But it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to that. And when it's you versus the Jordan Harbinger show, where he's talking to someone about conspiracy theories, and I see both episodes come up, I happen to be more like you, so I'm going to click your episode because I love that. But most people are like, ooh, conspiracy theories. Like, how have you kept it interesting in a way that you add the value that people need to learn in a way that's interesting for them? I'd just be curious to know kind of how you figured out the formula there.
Yeah, so basically what we do is we do the opposite what a lot of people do. We don't even go in the story, because I figure that many of my other colleagues on PodMatch hosts that cover the story much better than I do. I'm really only interested in bringing strategies to entrepreneurs, business owners, experts, coaches, consultants that are having the same problem. Is they probably invested in a bunch of different programs and systems. Their income goes like this, and there comes the day X where they go, okay, I spent $100,000 on all this stuff, and my business is still not growing. What am I missing? Yeah, it's a strategy. So it's for everybody who comes to that conclusion that at one point they've done everything else. What's missing? It's a strategy, or it's a growth plan, or it's a system. And then they come to us, and the premise of the show really is to say, let's be honest about this. Strategy is not that difficult. There's so many of them. How about we make it so easy for you that you understand there's so many of them, and you can actually pick and choose the strategy that works for you and your temperament and your personality and the type of business that you're in and what you want to do. And then you can implement that, and only that which works for you, without being tortured by strategies that drive you crazy.
That's a great point. So real quick, you bring guests on the show, or is it solo?
No, I bring guests on the show, and I do a pre-call interview where we are very determined about what is the one strategy that you're sharing with the audience. That's what I was looking for. And yes, and what I found, and this is sort of like a behind the scenes tip, I do really believe those 15 minutes on the pre-call are absolutely critical, because sometimes people look great on paper because they have somebody write it for them, and then they show up, and forgive me, it's like an Ambien, and they have very little to say, or their energy level is low. I had somebody who who changed her business in the process. So why am I going to promote somebody on the show that's not even in this business anymore? So you got, in order to be a good host, you have to show interest in the content.
It's a good point. I love that you set the standard here with somebody, because you're not going into the story. Like it's the way I would describe your podcast. This is not probably the most professional term, but all buff, no fluff, right? Like it's here's the strategy. You keep it short, and this is there it is right there. You all saw that. Come on, that's like how that's the focus of it. And I know we have another question here, so I'll be really brief and want to keep the room moving here. But how do you keep your guest on track? Like, are you doing a lot of prep work to do this? Because I think, in my mind, real quick, the future of podcasts, because Convince and Convert was the one that did this report, and you can go look it up on their website, but 74, 76, 70 some odd percent, don't quote me, from Convince or Convert said that 70 some odd percent of people who listen to podcasts stated that they listen to learn something new. And the childhood story, although some podcasts are about that sort of freedom, that journey, you can learn from that. But some people are straight up like, I need to learn how to build a system for my business. I think some of the future of podcasts is the more pointed content, where it's not like I've got to filter through 30 minutes of fluff to get to the 15 minutes I really need. Instead, you're just focusing on that. But how do you keep the guests focused on that when they're used to sharing all the stories and stuff like that?
I tell them up front, I actually have created a show flow document. And so they'll get that show flow document, and it says very clearly, you introduce yourself. We want it to be at 2 minutes or less. I'm going to ask you what strategy means for you. I'm going to ask you the one strategy.
Oop, I may have lost you here. Everybody else, is Beate frozen for anybody? Or am I the one who's frozen? Frozen. Okay.
Oh,
I think
I'm frozen.
You might be back. Hold on. Everyone's saying frozen.
Oh,
you're back now,
no.
though. I can hear you again.
Oh, okay. Oh, so sorry about that. I don't want to blame the company, but it starts with an S. And so what I said is that I have a show flow document, and in the show flow document, I outline the exact things that I want to cover, and then I just stick to that. And I never had a problem sticking.
That's great. Jason has a really good question here. Jason, thank you for asking this. But like, talking about how it's really difficult to is it difficult to say no on the pre-call? Because I'm imagining you've had some pre-calls, unless you're just really good at vetting, where you kind of shared that, like, clearly this person is not going to be what you're looking for. How have you been able to say no? I'd be curious to hear that process for you, if it's happened a lot or at all.
It does happen. And so what I then say is, I either say, look, I'm a strategist, and it's my obligation to the audience to get a clearly defined strategy. And I am not hearing it. I feel I'm fishing for the strategy you want to share. So how about you and I go on a separate call? I'll be happy to lend you my experience as a strategist, which sometimes then turns into a client, right?
There it
Shocking.
is.
And there it is. And help you to identify what that hook is that your business has, because that's why I'm in podcasting in the first place, is to identify potential clients. So if I identify potential clients in the pre-call, even better.
That's great. Good stuff. Beate, thank you for being part of this book. I really, really appreciate it. I got one more question for you here. Well, real quick, let's find the page. Do you know what it is off the top of your head? What is
41.
it?
41.
I'm going to make sure we're still.
41.
That's it. There it is, 41.
Here.
You got the latest version with me here. Page 41. Everyone's got to check that out. So before I let you go, real quick, just in 30 seconds or less, what's one critical strategy for a host? Something that a host just has to know.
You have to know that there's only two types of guests you want: somebody who elevates you, or somebody who can be your client.
That's great. Somebody elevates you, or somebody can be your client. Good stuff. I'm going to see who's coming up next here. I should have done this already, but Beate, thank you.
I got to go on a PodMatch interview.
Make it happen. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you. Yep.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Good stuff. Hopefully that was at my time, 3:30. Maybe she has 1 minute here. I just invited Seth up to stage. Let's see if he makes it here. Alicia, you clearly have a glitch in the chat. I'm seeing the words "so good," like you've said it a lot. you may need to log off and come back. Is anyone else seeing that? A lot. Like it's like spamming the chat. I don't know if everyone's still here or not, because now I can't see the chat at all. Give me just a minute here. Yeah, so Alicia, if you'll jump off and come back in, I think it might have had like a little bit of a glitch there. Still getting like 100 of them a second. And let me see if I can bring Seth up here. Just a minute here. Technical difficulties for sure. Is everybody with me? I want to see if I can see anybody else. Very interesting that's still happening. But I'm going to try to bring Coach John up. Let's see if I can bring you up. Hopefully everything is working there. I might just be out of the chat for a minute because it looks like we're having a little bit of a software glitch here. Hopefully everyone's still here. Alicia,
okay.
If you can still hear us, you might have to come in the room and tell me if you can see us or not and hear us, because on the chat, I can't tell anymore. John, are you seeing the same thing in the chat? Like Alicia is saying so good 100 times, or you don't see that?
No, not seen it at all.
Yeah, I hear you
me,
just
by the
fine.
way?
So for me, it looks like
I feel bad because I'm like in a closet, as it's very obvious to see. I'm not in my usual studio. So Tanya and the other gentleman
Michael,
whose
yeah.
name escapes me, have this beautiful like backdrop. Yeah. And I'm like in a closet trying to like shield the sound of like kids running around.
Nice.
Because we're visiting some friends.
Well, we're not doing an interview, so you're good. We're good to go. So excited to have you as part of this. And I'm going to quickly say something about, looks like the chat is back. Everyone's still here. I don't know what was happening on my end. Anyway, I saw Alicia like 100 times posting the same thing. I'm like, calm down. Like what they said was good, but not that good. So Coach John, thank you for being part of this. I got to mention, when I first met Coach John, we exchanged like one email, and then I got an email from him that was like a huge breakdown of our software, his thoughts on it, him comparing some other softwares. And I was like, dude, we got to be friends, and we got to talk, right? And my co-founder, not Alicia, the other co-founder, Jesse, the software guy, I sent it to him. He goes, I've never seen an email I like so much. And it wasn't all even good stuff. It was just the fact that it was like, man, this guy actually, like, I was like, he must work in software. He's got to. Like, he understands it. But we jumped on a call, and I learned a lot. And then you did this really great video comparing multiple softwares, PodMatch being one of them, that just in the podcasting space went viral. And it was like, I mean, we learned so much from it. Like, you did a deep dive on, was it 4 different softwares? Awesome, I think is what it was, right?
Yeah. I wanted to figure out, like, because I wanted to earn an ROI off being a podcast guest first, right? And so I was like, I need to figure out a way to calculate my ROI. How much time am I spending, and how much money am I spending to be on these platforms? How many interviews am I generating, and am I getting some revenue from it? And I think as of this month, with this month's PodMatch payout, I'm in the positive. In other words, I've now made more money than I paid into.
I love that.
PodMatch. Which is sweet. Yeah. So shout out to you guys for doing something revolutionary there. And on top of that, I think I've brought in probably this last year about 10 or 11 grand just from people whose podcast I've been on who interviewed me and then ended up hiring me and then paying me in full. So that was pretty exciting as well. So yeah, so unexpected like benefit of like I thought I was getting into podcasting to get people to sign up for my lead magnet and stuff like that. Turns out having an interview with someone is a great way to form an intimate connection.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about this because, I mean, you're a world-class coach. Like, you do really well by your clients, and I feel like you have global clients at this point, which is really cool. You started off strictly as a podcast guest. I don't even think you were thinking about being a host, right? Am I right in saying that?
That's correct. Yeah. But what it was is, like, 3 years ago, I was doing like these Facebook Lives in my Facebook group, and then I just grabbed the video audio and then like upload it to Anchor and call it a podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting. I was like, I'm just gonna call this a podcast. And I gave it the name like Wellness Unplugged. And then I got interviewed on I don't know if people know Shaman Morton. He runs, I forget the name of his podcast, but anyways, I got interviewed on his podcast, and he's like, yo, you gotta go check out this guy John on his podcast Wellness Unplugged. And I was like, shoot. Like I haven't like touched that thing for like 2 years. I didn't even know it was still sitting out there in cyberspace. But I had people ask me, well, when are you going to launch your podcast? So I was like, well, maybe that's the push I need to get into hosting as well. And so I relaunched Wellness Unplugged. But what I found was I didn't want to be constrained to just talking about like, I'm a weight loss coach and nutritionist originally. I didn't want to just be constrained to that. I'm so fascinated by human stories of like overcoming adversity. And I wanted to broaden like the people out like this. Like for me, podcasting is just indulging in great conversation. So I wanted to be able to explore more people's stories. And the reason why is I look at our brain. Our brain is wired to learn from stories. We don't really learn that much from factual information, but I have this expression, stories are sticky. In other words, they stick within our brain. And what we do as human beings is we listen to a story and listen for elements of ourselves in that story, looking for hope and inspiration for something we're trying to work through ourselves. And so I wanted to bring other people's stories to overcoming adversity, not just around like weight loss. And so it evolved into between the before and after. So exploring people's journeys.
So you did that. So you kind of like, it's a decision to go from a guest to a host, right? Like, and you're still a guest as well, but like it's a real decision to do that. What unexpected benefit came from it? Like, because you evaluate things, like clearly the way you evaluated our software and stuff. Like, we should find that video and send it here. By the way, it's really well thought out, and it teaches them about the rest of the software, and not just ours. It's helpful.
After this, I'll drop that link in the chat. I had to get really good. So I run an unscripted podcast. I have an idea of like how I want it to go, but mine's unscripted. And so I had to get really good at listening carefully and listening to small details, because when people tell their story, they often just gloss over something. And it's like, whoa, what did you just say there? You face planted when you were water skiing and you ended up losing 60% of your liver. What? Don't just gloss over this detail. That, I think you know the gentleman I'm talking about. Or maybe you do. Anyways, he knows you. But so it's like I had to get really good at listening carefully to small details so that I could ask meaningful questions to shine a light on parts of their story that people tend to overlook themselves. What that turned into is I'm also a coach and a mentor. I teach people how to build, like coaches, how to build basic online infrastructure. And so I started asking better questions as a coach because I was practicing this skill as a podcast host, leading to my clients getting better results as well.
I love it. You use it to learn, like to improve your craft. I think that's such an amazing thing, because a lot of us just look at it as like, okay, here's my business and here's my podcast. But you basically found a way to connect the two to improve. Like, you were already a really good coach. Like, I've heard some of the methodology put into it, some of the things you take people through, really impressive. But getting to also hear the fact that you've improved that even more from being a podcast host, I think is great. And that's honestly, I owe my entire ability to speak well from being a host and being a guest, right? They kind of go hand in hand, but podcasting in general. So I love that. I think that's just a really great point. Before we end time here, because I got to keep this thing on time, I do want to ask, do you have any critical strategy, and just show us, as quickly as you can, about being a podcast host? Like, what is it about being a podcast host that you say this is the critical thing people have got to get right?
Know how to ask like good questions and take back and keep steering the conversation, because storytellers will run away with things. So be okay with asking good questions that steer the conversation.
Now I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry, I got to do this. I'm supposed to be moving on here, but I got a follow-up question. Have you ever asked a question you thought was good but realized it was bad, and do you try to recover from it, or do you just move on to the next one?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on the circumstance, kind of the rapport that I have with the individual. But I've gotten good at just being gracious about saying, hey, you know what? You just glossed over something that I wanted to go back to, if you don't mind. So just kind of politely interrupting and saying, hey, can we go back to this thing here? And it gets smoother if you just do it a few times and you're like, oh, it's okay. It wasn't the end of the world when I did that. That's
smart. Tanya and Michael just said to edit it out, like if they do that. And that's always the method I've taken. But recently I was listening to a podcast where somebody did what you just said, but they left the interruption in there, and it actually made me listen even more. So I'm not saying I'm probably always going to edit that out myself, but like hearing somebody be like, hey, hold on, let me dive back. Cause what I was really asking was this. I immediately, like, you could feel the friction, like, and they had good rapport, obviously. So it wasn't like they were going to start yelling at each other. But for me, it's like, ooh, a little bit of tension. The question must be really important if they were willing to interrupt to go back to it. I'm glad you answered it that way. That's really interesting.
Well, and I'll just say, for the sake of efficiency, I don't really edit my podcast unless there is like an internet interruption or something like that, because I think the number one reason, or one of the big reasons why people get out of podcasting, is because it can take a lot of time to edit. So I said that's why I run an unscripted podcast. So I just run it through Aphonic, and that's it. So
I love it. Coach John, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you. Where are you at in this book? I gotta open it up here. Do you know?
Oh, I was going to say page 57, but I think I've got it wrong.
I'm going to find it,
because I didn't get my physical copy.
I know it's in here somewhere.
And Tim says, I have to pull back the guests all the time because they want to race ahead. Yeah, and that's super, you know, because again, we tell our story a lot. We just get used to like zipping over things. And so just being like, hey, I don't want to use that expression. I was going to say something, but anyways, in other words, don't get through everything in the first 5 minutes. Let's put it that way. There's an impolite way of saying that, but we'll say just don't get through everything in the
Yeah.
first 5 minutes.
I think that's good. I love that feedback as well. Like, let it be a conversation, right? It looks like you're page 55. Did you say
Yeah.
53? Is maybe 57? Okay,
57.
yeah, that makes sense because it looks like the latest revision. But there it is, everybody, page 55 or 57, depending on the revision you have. But
Yeah.
man, thank you again for being here. I really, really appreciate you and just being part of what we do. It means a lot to me.
Thank you, man.
All right, good stuff. I'm going to bring up Tim. Tim and I have had some great interaction leading up to this, so I'm excited to have this conversation here. Let's see. I should have pulled up first, right? And that's kind of the strategy here. So give it a minute here. And while I'm waiting real quick, I'm going to throw this up on stage here. What's up, Tim? I'm doing great.
How you doing?
Let me quickly throw the book up here. I don't know who's gotten it yet, but here is a link to the book. I want to make sure everyone gets the opportunity to do that. And then later on, I'm add a poll and let's see who's got it. Come on. There we go.
Well, this
book right here. That's it.
You turned me into a published author.
Did you have a book? You had a book before this?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, you and I both.
I've had a few bits and pieces published, but not that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, I'm excited that we're both first-time authors together. It's an honor here, so I really appreciate that. First off, where are you? Where are you calling in from?
I'm in England. I'm in. If you look at England, look at the south coast. You've got a big island called the Isle of Wight. Just off to the northeast, you've got Portsmouth Harbour. I'm on the opposite side of Portsmouth Harbour in Gosport.
Gotcha. Very cool. What's the weather like? Just out of curiosity. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. It's still hot here right now, but what's it like over there?
It has been actually.
Oh, okay.
we've had a bit of a storm come through the last couple of days.
Well, it's good to be in podcasting when that happens, right? So can you tell everybody, can you quickly just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of dive into a question here as well.
Yeah, I got into. I've been podcasting for a couple of years. I was dragging people, kicking and screaming to come on the podcast. I actually sort of run out of people back end of last year, and I ended up doing quite a lot of rants on a Thursday rant until I got into PodMatch at the beginning of this year, and I'm about 138. No, I should be doing 140 as of tomorrow interviews. Whether there's a few where I've guested, but the vast majority is as a host.
Congratulations. I love that. You know, my question to you is because you're about to release episode 140, or you've recorded that many? I can't remember what the.
No, I've recorded 140 on PodMatch. I've got 200 and I think something like 225, something like that.
So my question to you is, because most people who podcast make it to the mass majority is one episode. Past that is 7 episodes. And then it's between 10 and 15, which is kind of a range. And then 25. And then people who make it past 25 seem to do okay till about 50, 100, right? And most people will stop before they reach 100. What, in your mind, has been the key to the longevity of sticking with it, even when it was hard to find guests? You talk about like kind of having to go after it. Like, what kept you going with it, just out of curiosity? And what advice can you give a host who's much fresher in their journey, who wants to do what you've done?
For me, people ask, who's my avatar? Now, that's a fairly tough question for me, because my avatar hasn't actually been born yet.
Explain that, if you don't mind.
You think, how's that work then? Right. I have a basic format for my show. I ask people when and where they were born, describe what it's like when they grew up, the schools they went to, the education they got. We'll kick that around. We'll look at their work life history. And the whole point is to leave a legacy for future generations, because we can't go back in history and see what our ancestors did. You can see what famous people did possibly, but for us, my great granddad lived about 3 miles from where I live now, over in Gosport. I've got his war record. He was a chief stoker in the Royal Navy, and he died in 1930. His story is lost to history. Mine isn't. So I started off, I told my story, which is 24 half-an-hour episodes. So if anybody out there is struggling to get to sleep, suffering from insomnia, stick one of those on, put you out.
I really love, one of the things I love about podcasting is the different niche that people can, like, you can kind of get into, right? And I love the fact that your show, like when I don't know when we even first interacted, but when I first saw this show, I was like, wow, I've never heard of this before. Right. I think it's a great thing. Like, even an example, my grandfather passed away last year, and we have the memories of him, but there's no like true document that's like, there's pieces, let's put it this way, pieces of his childhood that he never really like got into. But my family has a really interesting history. Like, here's something really interesting. Has anyone heard of the movie Moonstruck? It had Nicolas Cage in it, and I can't remember, Cher maybe is the other person. So that movie's about my family, and I had no clue until my granddad, his last year of life, was like, yeah, that movie that Hollywood made about our family. I was like, no, there's no Hollywood movie about our family. He's like, yes, there is. And he pulled up the documents, and those are my relatives. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, that could have died with you. Like, that's the type of story that you're probably able to catch, which I think is a really beautiful thing. And so for you, like, just being able to stick with it when it's difficult, is it just the sheer motivation of loving to capture those stories? Do you go back to your great grandfather's story? Like, what keeps you going is what I'd really like to know.
I just love talking to people and find out about their lives. Now, as a host, I've got 2 of these, 1 of these, and that's the way that I like to use it. When I set up an interview with somebody, I like to go in cold. I don't do a huge amount of research at all. I like to have a nice flowing conversation. Generally, I can get the best out of somebody. And I've done lots of guys that's in the book so far, in the guesting book and the hosting book. And we've had a great time.
I love that.
And that's just having, it's just having some fun, basically. That's the reason I do it. I just like having fun. And I also do a live stream. And all my interviews now, I record on, I have been doing with StreamYard, so they go up as a YouTube as well as the podcast. And I do very little editing. I top and tail it and then bung it straight out. So it's a natural conversation. And I believe I'm getting a little bit better.
That's good. I mean, hey, after that episode, you got the reps in. Listen, I was going to ask you for the strategy, but I don't think there's anything better you can share than you've got 1 of these and 2 of these, right? I think that that's such an important reminder for hosts everywhere that if we're bringing on talent, our job is to ask great questions and be quiet, because that's how you get the best stories out. I don't know what page you're on this. Do you know?
95.
95. Yeah, 95. There it is.
90,
Chapter 12,
99.
95. Everyone go check that out. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm there on the back cover.
Yep, there you are. I love it. I appreciate you being here so much.
Thanks,
Tim. Take care.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Oh, quick one before you go. The podcast show London, 24th, 25th of May. It's a great show. I did the show this year. I should be going there this year. You guys,
we actually plan on it. That is currently the plan, and I'm going to coordinate with you. We're going to be there. We're going to get to meet in person. It's going to be a lot of fun.
If you need a bit of an hand on the stand plug, I'm your man. I'm going to be there for the 2 days anyway.
I love it. Thanks so much, Tim. I really appreciate you. Yep. Take care. Good stuff. I love that. Wade, what's up, man?
Not much, man. Doing well. How you doing,
because you were in both books, and you and I already talked earlier today. You had to run for an interview, I think, right? You had to jump off.
I interviewed Beate earlier today, and I'm going to be interviewing Omar Zenhom in about 40
Well, I brought
minutes.
you at the right time then. We're going to keep you here for exactly 40 minutes. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. Man, thanks for being here. Hey, I always have a lot of questions for you. There's there's a couple I want to ask, but real quick, can you just, for 30 seconds here, anyone who doesn't know you, can you just talk about yourself for just a second here? And then I'm going to ask you one of two questions I might have for you, or maybe both if you're lucky. So.
Sure. I help entrepreneurs create a 3-day weekend type lifestyle so they can enjoy family, friends, and life. So a little bit of helping people with their productivity, a little bit of helping them with their priorities, their marketing, their strategies, all sorts of different pieces, but with a specific end, to have time for life, to enjoy life outside of work, not just work. A lot of times it's families want more time with their kids, especially when their kids are, let's say, 10 and younger, when they still want to hang out with you. Or maybe when they're 13 and you realize they're on their way out, or that sort of stuff. But for single people too, or empty nesters as well. So just help people create that sort of life. I have a small software company. I've been a coach for years, and I love playing beach volleyball on
The
weekends.
weekends, your weekend starts Friday when you wake up, and Saturday,
Friday.
Sunday as well.
Yes, sir.
And this, I mean, you religiously play volleyball, I think, right? Like it's.
Yes, even Ian hit us, so we don't have our beaches right now, but now we play at the parks for now.
Good to go,
so,
man.
Yes. And awesome family, a wife, 16-year-old,
Love
13-year-old.
it. Had the opportunity to meet the whole family, because this is one of the questions I had for you, and hopefully I have time to get into both. We'll see. But you are you're a believer in podcasting community. So like you go beyond just the I'm a podcast host, leave me alone, everyone else, I'm doing my show, right? You go into the, hey, I'm going to get into the events. I'm going to show up at them. And last time we were at PodFest Orlando, you brought your whole family, had the opportunity to meet your whole family. And that was a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this guy really believes in podcasting and podcasters. He's here showing up. You're giving your book away. Not this book, but you're giving away, I think, what do you have? Three books? You give books. You have some other books. And you're giving them away and stuff, man. I just want to talk to you. What role has the community of podcasting played in your success or longevity as a podcaster?
Sure. So a couple things. So I first got started during COVID. I'd been to PodFest once, but then I met you through the virtual PodFest, and I was one of the people. I just told Chris Kermitzos, I'm like, dude, I'll do the back end work. I wanted to learn how he put on the event, and so I just started meeting people. And again, to me, you meet the coolest people, and you meet people in the coolest situations when they have time. So when you might be backstage with some superstar that once they get inside of in front of the paparazzi, they have no time, but you meet other people behind the stage, that sort of stuff, and just learning from people. So I've just always, that whole concept, Gary Vee will talk about it, different people like, hey, if you come work with me, you mentor with me, or is what Mark Cuban says, people should pay him to intern with him. I think you just learn from people in that way. And then our community is very much a grassroots community. So most people are open to being helped. They're open to working together. And so I've just always enjoyed that. And then specifically the PodFest community and the PodMatch community really believe in sharing the work with people, really believe in people's voice being heard, really believe in supporting each other and abundance. So it's an awesome group, and always energized every time I do an event or go to an event or work behind the scenes or interview somebody.
Love that. All right, man. So I have one more question for you. You have a little bit of time here, so we'll kind of go quick on this. But when we were in the guest, like an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, we were talking about being a guest, and you shared about guest sharing and stuff like that, and like not just you being the host, and then just after the interview's done, you never hear from them again, they never share anything. You've been able to predict how a prospect guest is going to support your show, like how well they're going to do with that, what they're going to do with your social media and stuff. What does that process look like for you to predict that? And also, like, I'm guessing it affects if you're going to book them or not, right? Can you talk about that so other hosts can understand? Because real quick, that all of us, like, it's like, man, this is such a good episode. Here it is. And the guest is like, thanks. And then you never hear from them again, right? Like, we want to avoid that.
Yep.
So anyway, how has this worked out for you? Because I know you've kind of got some stuff here.
Sure. So a few things. The quick why behind it is, if I interview A-list celebrity A, and John Lee Dumas or Pat Flynn or Joe Rogan interviews them, guess whose episode's getting more views? So me alone, the simple fact that I interview person A doesn't, in my experience, limited experience, maybe there's better opinions. So if somebody knows better than me, that's fine. I'll take that. But for the most part, that doesn't do a whole lot for my show unless they create a lot of value for my show, and or I can build some sort of connection relationship with them, and or they'll share it. But if they're just coming on to dump and run, not interested. I'm not interested in saying I was the 57th groupie of Aerosmith or the 1,000th person who hooked up with Wilt Chamberlain. No offense. I don't that doesn't do anything for me. I know it's a little crude example, but it sticks. It's like, now all that being said, not all A-listers are like that, not even close. Some generally are like, and they're busy. But if you're busy as an A-lister and you're saying, I'm busy making bajillions, well, somewhere in those bajillions, you can have a social media person who on your behalf can like and share, at least just say like, share, comment, something. And the funny thing is so for me, I don't want those one night stands. I don't want that. That's never been my style in relationships with people and anything. So when you consider as a host that we're putting in, when you're a beginner, maybe 5 to 10 hours if you're producing it yourself. Maybe you get better, it's 5 hours. If you're doing really good assets and video assets or different things like that, or good show notes, or I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You're doing at least 5 to 10 hours, or you're dropping anywhere from $250 to $500 per episode. I don't want somebody that comes in, and it goes kind of back to even something what Beate said about even the pre-interview. And I'm not here to sell people on it if they don't want to, but if somebody won't show up for my pre-interview, and I get that some people are so busy, unless I know their work, like somebody who's way up, that I just know their work, I've read their books for years, that's different. I know their work, I already know what I'm going to get with them. But anybody else, if you won't put in 15 minutes with me, you're not going to promote my stuff. Not even a prayer. You're too busy. And no offense, I'm not interested in as much as I've tried to, I want to help 1 million people. Realistically, I can't help 1 million people. Not to a certain level of depth that truly transform their lives. I can create books and different things. And I'm not against that. But at the end of the day, I want deeper connections with people. So number one, will they show up for pre-interview? Or at least if they don't, they'll have a good reason to say, yeah, I'll talk 5 minutes, 10 minutes before. Sure, they have a tight schedule. And number two, just look at what their social media feed is. In my case, my VA looks at that. If they're not sharing anybody else's stuff, I'm not so special that they're going to share my stuff. And again, there's a certain level of give and take in the universe. I do fundamentally believe that regardless of how much money we make, I'm no more important than anybody else and no less important than anybody else. So when people come from that place and they're caught up in that whole thing, it usually doesn't vibe with what I do anyway. Now, other people might say, wait, it vibes with me, I'm fine with that. Or I'll sort of, I'll sell my time. But at the end of the day, at some point you realize, just like your mom would tell you, well, if she's not good enough for you, there's other people in the sea. And if she knew better, she'd say, and now look on PodMatch. And PodMatch will find other people, the nice boys and nice girls that will support your show. And they will make sure they share your stuff and you won't be left by yourself. So, there you go.
Well done. Hey, something I got to share there is I've had a lot of people recently reach out to me like, hey, I had a guest miss the pre-interview call and then they missed the actual interview. Should I rebook with them? And my first thing I say is like, why did you continue to move forward if they missed the pre-interview call? It's like you're hiring a position for a job, right? You have a company and you're like, come to the interview. They don't show up for the interview. Do you give them the job? No. And a lot of us hosts, we're getting like, you're like, oh, but I worked so hard to get them there. I'm like, if they don't have that much respect for you to show up, they're not going to do it in the real day, right? And like you're saying, at the end of the day, if we're here to add value, to like have some synergy with somebody, because those are the best interviews, not the big names aren't as good as the true synergetic content that's being formed. It's better just to say no and just alleviate that stress anyway. Sometimes it's just not worth it. But anyway.
Well, yeah, and JLD said something when I went to PodFest in 2019, and he's so good. He's such a good presenter. He's like, I'm not going to be on your show. He's like, booger, you're on stage. He's like, what's the chances that I'm in line with yours? He says, and you're probably not going to be on mine. So again, if it's truly in the best interest of the audience, would I put my ego second? Yes, but why would I have to? And usually, guess what? My audience is a lot like me. So if I don't like the la-di-da-ness and this and that, it's not. But again, a lot of people that are high-end people that will support, but I'll tell you this, a smart guest, I have a person, Chad Willardson, he's just released his 3rd book. Awesome guest. He is operating at a higher level financially and impact than I am. Great guy. Guess what? I support his stuff. He supports my stuff. He's not better than. And so to me, there are people like that get it. And I met him through PodMatch. And there are people that they just want to give because they get that they're not bigger. They're not caught up in their stuff. So
good stuff, man. Hey, before I let you go here, one critical hosting strategy, 30 seconds or less. What do you got for us?
Critical hosting strategy. it's your job to get something from the guest that nobody else has gotten from them. And I think that was kind of, I think it was Jonathan that referenced that. I want to get something from them that nobody has, just because otherwise, what am I offering? If I'm offering the same interview that's on somebody else's show, and so be okay with it being awkward. I like the awkward pauses. Again, in other tech issues, I'll edit out, but I used to edit all my stuff. And then the other thing is, don't edit this unless, man, I grew up listening to Zig Ziglar, and our audio back then, not Zig, our audio was cassette tapes. Our audio stunk, and we still learned. So when people get caught up, well, they made a noise or he breathed. You can spend your whole life editing, or you can just move on. Now they resell that. They say with acoustic stuff, you hear the frets. That's called that's called authentic acoustic music. When we first heard it, like, what is this stuff on the CD? You can hear his fingers. So make it easy, take it easy on yourself. Mike, thank you so much. Mike kept me coloring inside the lines. Mike earned his money with me. You didn't, I don't know, you might or might not have known Alex, but Mike kept me coloring in the lines. So thank you for that, Mike, and keeping me in the lines, and had a great experience. Thank you, both you all.
Wait,
really
thanks for being
this.
here. Thanks for being in both books, man. I really appreciate you. Love you, bro. Catch up with you soon. Good stuff. Mike, I'm excited to have you on stage. And here's the reason, one of the main reasons. One, because of the book we're talking about here. But two, we're going to end early for everybody. I went over last time, but this time we're going to end early, which I'm psyched about, because my pastor uses this phrase that's not from scripture, but sounds like it is. He says, blessed are the short-winded, because they will be welcomed back. And so if you can end early, people will come to hear you again. But when you go over, they're like, not again. He abused my time. So I'm excited about that. But Mike, these two books, we're getting amazing feedback. We're getting amazing reviews on Amazon. I'm going to quickly ask everybody a question here. Put up a poll. Have you bought this book yet? Here we go. Sharing it real quick here. Love to hear what you've got. And I'll also drop the link up here for anybody. We got a heck yes, I have a bunch of those. Good stuff. I need a link. The link is up here now for everybody. Be sure to grab that. Haven't purchased yet. Now is your chance. I believe we have it discounted this week. Is that right? Cool.
Yes. Good
stuff. Yeah. I'm excited about this. I'm almost through. I got a couple chapters left in the host book. I'm going to get there, or the guest book. Sorry. Anyway, getting close, but I've loved what I've learned. It's funny. Like, I'm co-creator of PodMatch, right? And I'm reading it. I'm like, never thought about that. I'm like, just never crossed my mind to use it that way. Thank you for putting this together, man. It seriously means so much. I'm really excited to be able to do this with you.
Well, as I mentioned on the guest call, Alex, first of all, thanks for having a platform that's quality enough to warrant not only one book, but two books. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to learn from some of the best. And that was really, it was a self-serving interest I had, and why I approached you about doing this, because I wanted to learn how to leverage PodMatch better. And it's been a tremendous ride. And as I said before on the other call meeting, there's a ton of gold nuggets on this. So read it, but more importantly, apply it, because there's a ton of wisdom.
Love that. Rob just mentioned that he bought the book. Rob, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. And I'm also going to throw up another resource real quick here. We're probably going to have more talks about this book at Pod Talks quarterly in January. There's a 50% off link, which I like to give to everybody. So make sure these books will come up at that event, and we'll probably do something around that. So make sure you grab that if you're not planning on attending it. But Mike, also bitesizebooks.com is where people can find you if they're interested in doing a project. Because I told you, I'm like, well, now whenever I go to write like a solo book, not one with a bunch of us, although this was the most incredible experience I've ever had when it comes to any form of content creation. I mean, look at all these faces, right? You're the guy I'm going to call, because clearly, like, you've got this thing down. And so I just appreciate it. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun, man. And thank you again, everybody. Just thank you to Mike for making this happen, because I didn't do anything, man. What did I spend 8 hours on this total, maybe? So
you're not supposed to tell those little secrets.
My bad. Alex. Sorry about that.
You worked your butt off.
I mean, those 8 hours, I worked hard for them.
Listen, as I always tell people, Alex, the easy part is creating the book. It really is. The hard part is what we're doing now, which is introducing it. And the only way a book has impact is if it's out there, and we're sharing it, and all the co-authors are promoting it and all that. But even beyond that, it's about consistent marketing and promotion. Because if someone doesn't know about your book, it's not going to help them.
Yeah. So it's so true. And that leads me straight to a question for you, and then we'll end here. You're a podcast guest and a podcast host and a guy who helps people write books and an author. how does that all work? But I really want to talk about the host side of things. Like, what role does your podcast play in it? Because from the start of this, we talked about how it's a labor of love. It's a lot of additional work in addition to all the other things you're doing. How do you tie that in a way that makes it fruitful for the entire platform you've built?
Yeah, I mean, the short, quick answer is it's lead generation for me, right? So it's the opportunity to get in front of other people's audiences, as a guest, or in my case, as a host. It's about guests potentially sharing the episode with their audiences. So that's one thing. And really, what I would say, Alex, because I always encourage my clients, and I'm always encouraging them to check out PodMatch too. If you have written a book and you are an expert in a certain subject or a thought leader in a certain subject, there's a very good chance that you should really think about hosting your own show. Very quickly, can I tell a quick 30-second story?
Please, yeah.
So we just got a new book author client. He played in the NFL for a couple of years. He has 2 Super Bowl rings. But the really key thing about this gentleman is he's now a medical doctor. NFL, Super Bowl, 2-time Super Bowl winner to medical doctor. He is working with us to write his first book. Awesome guy, by the way. I had a call with him yesterday, and one of the suggestions I had at the end of the call was, we're just in the beginning phases, but I said, hey, you need to think about possibly having a show around your expertise, because his topic is very interesting. It has a very specific audience. So I really do believe thought leaders should really think about how they can leverage a podcast show for not only to help people, of course, because you serve first, but really, serving your business and what you do.
Love it. And those two things can go hand in hand. So
absolutely,
there's a great way to do it. And I think that you've really done that. You are the first chapter in both books, and
which is the privilege of being the publisher.
Right? Save the best for first, like it is the opportunity, but you share some really interesting stuff given your experience and what you do, because beyond an author, you help authors, right? So like you have a very unique perspective on both sides of the mic. And it's why I encourage everyone to grab a copy of the book, even just to hear that perspective is worth it. But Mike, thank you again. Really, really appreciate you. And everybody, thanks so much for being here. We're going to close out early with your extra time. Don't work, go outside, get some fresh air, do something fun. And I look forward to catching up with you all soon. But thanks again, everybody. And thanks, Mike, for making this happen.
See ya.
You all take care.